Hello, everybody. So I am very late, very late at posting this chapter. But as an apology, because I literally just didn't even follow the schedule I just put up. I'm going to be recording more than one chapter today. Hopefully, I'm going to record the amount that I want to record today, but we will see. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. Perfect Sun by That One Guy with That One Ship. Read by Munchin on Mochiko. Chapter 7. What is mine? Sun woke up and yawned loudly. He threw off the light duvet and sat up, leaning forward. Huh? Lusamine said beside him, startled into wakefulness by his sudden activity. Oh, Sun. In the night, Sun had wandered down to his adoptive mother's room and asked to spend the night with her. It would be the first time, but not the last, that Lusamine would wonder if she went too far when programming his dedication. She had refrained all night from doing anything untoward with him, simply enjoying his company. It put her at ease, having something so similar, so close. Good morning, Mother. Sun smiled. He sidled over to nuzzle against her, but Lusamine wasn't in the mood for his affection so shortly after waking up. She felt Sun's nose against her bare shoulder, heard him take a deep breath of her scent and sigh in pleasure. Can't I lie in for another 5 minutes? Lusamine snatched up part of the duvet and pulled it back over herself. Sure, Sun said, shifting away to give her some space and burying himself in the duvet, pulling up to his side to mirror Lusamine. His head poked out of the covers, and he wrapped himself up in the sheets. What are we doing today? He tossed and turned side to side in bed, trying to respect his mother's wishes for another 5 minutes. It was difficult to restrain himself from touching her, and the want to be closer was a constant nagging, a feeling of loneliness even though he was so close to her. I don't know, Sun. Please calm down. It's early. Okay, Sun said and fell quiet, rolling onto his back. Sorry, Mother. It's all right, Lusamine muttered, unable to stay irritated at her new son. She yawned. Come here, she beckoned and put her arms around him. Sun nestled right back into her shoulder. Maybe I could do within 5 more minutes, he mumbled, and Lusamine laughed. Sun giggled too. They lay in silence for a while, Lusamine contemplating all the ways she could teach Sun to be just like her. She would teach him everything about the Foundation, about herself. She'd be his in the way he was hers, and if he could prove his loyalty and love to her. She felt a growing eroticism in her body, a flame kindling, guttering, and then burning bright, her eyes glowing with that immortal fire. Her hands moved down to his back, and very slowly folded over the bottom of his plain white pajama top, ready to start touching his back, moving over his chest, shoulders, and to his. Lusamine's phone started buzzing on the table beside her, making the two of them jump. She scowled and reached to take the phone up in her hand, and upon seeing the caller details, her expression darkened further. Swiping to answer, she put the phone to her ear. What is it? As she spoke, Sun put his arms around the waist holding the phone up, rubbing up and down on it like it was a scratching post while making a strange noise. Lusamine ignored him. Oh, hey, Miss Brez. You sound good this morning. Guzma's voice was the deep, rough tone of typical gangsters and scum like the rest of his ragtag band, and despite the two of them being close partners, Lusamine was almost never happy to hear it. What is it? Lusamine repeated. Don't waste my time with courtesy calls. So I found your kids. They were hanging out by the Cantonian, you know. Lusamine's blood ran cold, and she shouted suddenly. Stop! Sun flinched and let go, thinking she was addressing him. She closed her eyes. "Give me one moment." "Sun, stay here," she said, taking the phone away from her mouth to speak to Sun, who nodded silently, still scared by how loud she'd been. She stood up and rushed into a corner of her room. "What?" "They were hanging out by that one kid's house in Hao-Oli, so I beat down that kid's mom just like you asked me." Guzma paused, as if expecting praise, but Lusamine was far too engrossed in Sun to learn any more about his previous life. And I found them." "Well, bring them already on it, miss." Lusamine hung up. The phone rang again. Lusamine picked it up. "Miss Prez, if I could—" Lusamine hung up. The phone rang again. Lusamine made a guttural noise of frustration and switched the phone off violently. She crossed back over to the bed and lay down next to Sun, who was heading away silently, still afraid he'd angered her somehow. Lusamine didn't read his body language at all as she pulled him close, and while he resisted at first, the fabric of her nightdress, the softness of her hair folding over him, her skin against his, took priority over earlier outbursts in Sun's brain. He melted into her again, placing all his trust in her, loving her. "I didn't tell you about your brother and sister, did I?" Sun gasped. "I have a brother and a sister?" "Yes, you do, my sweet child. They're not like you. You're perfect." Lusamine had developed a habit of absent-mindedly playing with his hair, and she did so as she spoke. "They were meant to be perfect, but neither of them were as beautiful as you." She wasn't lying. She saw something in Sun, something new, something truly special. She didn't know what, but it made her heart flutter and her breath stop when she looked at him. "What are they like? Was that them on the phone? Can I call them? No, Sun. You have to be a surprise. They don't know about you yet. They're coming here soon, and you'll be able to meet them." Lusamine was regrettably wide awake now. "When they arrive, I want you on your best behavior." "I'm always on my best behavior," Sun proudly announced. "Good to know. Come on, Sun. Let's get up now." Lusamine sent Sun up to his room to change out of his pajamas and back into the style she had laid out for him, while herself changing out of the nightdress she was wearing into one of the many copies of her trademark dress. She waited for him in the living room, the first room upon entering the mansion. It was the largest room, and it housed all manner of casual meetings between important officials as well as her family. Gold sparkles hung in the air, and the black furniture made a statement against the white surroundings. Just another example of her uniform color scheme. Sun came back down from his room, fully dressed, dragging her over to the mirror to admire them both. He was over the moon at her resemblance before his smile vanished. "Mother, I'm missing something." He frowned. "I can't tell what it is." Lusamine had to second-guess herself. She thought Sun looked exactly like her in every way, so she didn't understand his complaint. "No, Sun, you're perfect. Look," she said, and pointed into the reflection. "We're completely alike." She struck a pose as if taking a photo shoot alongside him. He was still frowning and didn't play along. "What's the matter, Sun?" "Something's missing," he said shortly. "Sorry, Mother." He trembled. "What? You've got nothing to be sorry about, my sweet child." Lusamine didn't want him to be like this. It was already distressing to see him confused and upset. She wanted to cuddle him and protect him from the evils of the outside world, anything that might take him away from her delicate and loving care. She'd given him a wonderful opportunity, and it was one he was now taking wholeheartedly, so the last thing she wanted was for him to fail in any way. Sun shook his head, frustrated. "I'm not like you," he mumbled, on the verge of some emotional outburst, which emotion was difficult to read. "Oh, wait." He pointed to her chest in the mirror. I'm missing that. Lusamine was in shock for a moment, then realized he was talking about the crystal mounted on the front of her dress. She exhaled sharply in an emulation of a huff of laughter. You're right, son. She thought it strange how he had noticed that ornamental different, yet she hadn't. What are we going to do? Son was far more shook by this tiny difference than Lusamine expected. He looked like he was about to start crying. He nuzzled his head into her waist, lying down in shame. Son, calm down. It'll be fine. She patted him on the back gently. We'll find you something. It's my fault for not thinking about it. She basked in the feeling of having Son so close to her, like a little warm glow, a lantern's light against her body. Come on now, let's get up and about, she encouraged. Breakfast was delivered from the Paradise kitchen. The chefs on Paradise worked around the clock, feeding both Pokemon and people. Son was still disturbed, Lusamine could tell. Son, she said, concerned, he wasn't eating very well, which was already very bad news indeed. Son, it's all right. It's nothing. I know. He continued to poke at his food morosely. I'm not perfect. No, son, no. Lusamine reassured. You're beautiful. Son seemed less than convinced. You're absolutely perfect. Son met her eyes at last. Are you sure? That was not right. That was not the same voice. That was not the right Son. That was the Son who resisted. That was the Son who had fought. The procedure had worked. Absolutely it had. But that part of his personality, his stubborn nature, wasn't gone. And it had flipped to the point where the stubbornness towards being his own person was now instead pushing towards being just like her. That only meant good things once he was satisfied with himself. Lusamine reached out across the table, holding her arm out. Yes, son, I promise you. I'll find something. It doesn't matter right now. It doesn't. If I think you're perfect, you're perfect. Son at first looked unconvinced. Then a small smile appeared on his face. He reached out to her, and they grazed fingertips. Lusamine nodded reassuringly. She retracted her arm and returned to her food, hoping Son would do the same. It was only a few seconds before she saw he wouldn't, but she still went on eating to try to set an example. Son continued to stare at her. It wasn't an antagonistic stare. It was as if he wanted to see her so much he could somehow become her. Stop staring, she ordered, more scared by it than she would have liked to admit. Son found it difficult to tear himself away. Sorry. He's an experiment, Lusamine explained to Wick. Make up whatever official-sounding story you'd like, should anyone ask, but he is mine, and he shouldn't hear it himself. He's that boy, Son, Wick said, not to be deceived. What have you done? Lusamine had taken Son up to the Pokemon conservation sector of the Paradise. They were in a fairy-type sector. Son was throwing a Jigglypuff into the air and catching it as it floated down, playing some sort of game. The Jigglypuff in question had a green headband on, the balloon Pokemon known for its strange liking towards human headwear. He wanted this. I've set him free, Lusamine gestured, indicating Son's carefree state. It's too late to stop you, Wick said with disapproval in every syllable. Whatever you've done, it's too late for me to stop you. Are you questioning my authority? Lusamine asked with a glare. Wick was far smarter than Faba in battles of wit such as these. No, I'm saying I would have questioned your authority if you had informed me you were doing this to him. I'm also saying it's too late for me to now do anything for him except the best I can, which falls in line with what you want. So, you'll look after him? That's what I said, Wick replied smartly. Lusamine couldn't get angry at her the same way she could at Faba. I'll be with him for perhaps the next few weeks, then I'll be relying on you to take care of him. Lusamine didn't see it, watching Sun, but Wick was visibly taken aback by the announcement. She was vice president, not a babysitter. In the past, she looked after Lily and Gladian, but that was more forgivable. Lusamine had always been a stone's throw away, and Wick had been able to do admin tasks at the same time. Sun threw the Jigglypuff upward again, the pink ball trying to outmaneuver Sun by drifting through the air. It used Pound to stall for time, Sun trying to stay below it. The shiny green material of its headband formed a trail behind it. What do you want with him? It's not for your ears, Wick. Sun caught up again and now dropped the Pokemon, which floated softly to the ground. He crouched to give it a pat on the curl on his forehead, and it bounced away after a quick wave. Lusamine noticed a small group of Ralts collecting near Sun. They were attracted to positive emotion. He's perfectly healthy. Forget what he was, Wick. All that matters is what he is. I'm afraid you might be right. Sun? He looked up at Lusamine's call. Come on, she beckoned. He crossed back to her side. The Pokemon followed in some of the way, stopping close to Lusamine. What is it, Mother? Wick looked between Sun from Lusamine at the word Mother. This is Miss Wick, Assistant Branch Manager here at the Foundation. She will look after you when I am unable to. Wick noticed Sun's eyes narrow almost imperceptibly, his smile vanishing. He looked less than impressed with her. Why? He asked. It wasn't a childish question. It was a challenge. He didn't trust her. Sun, please. I can't be around you all the time. I'm very busy, so I'm relying on Wick to look after you when I can't. Sun was still glaring. He looked murderous. Wick already had reservations about him. But I want you, he begged, holding her around the waist as if to protect her. His expression softened as he looked up at her. Lusamine placed a hand on his head and stroked his hair. Sun, I can't be with you all the time, she repeated. He wasn't trying her patience simply because she knew he wanted to be as close to her as possible. I trust Miss Wick here with you, and we won't be separated for more than a few hours at a time. That made Sun brighten up a little, and he tried to give Wick a smile. It looked very forced. The moment he dropped his smile, he looked embarrassed, lost. He clung tighter to Lusamine. Are you going to go now? No, Sun. Are we going now? Lusamine understood Sun's meaning. We're going to the other conservation wings with Wick, Lusamine said. I want to show you the whole place. Can I say hello to all the Pokemon? Wick saw Sun's enthusiasm for Pokemon had remained, if little else. The conversation had unsettled her deeply. Lusamine may trust her with Sun, but Wick didn't trust Sun with herself. Most of them, Lusamine replied to Sun, trying to encourage him, having picked up on his reservation towards Wick. Sun beamed properly now, even smiling at Wick. Come on, then. Let's go. Sun was tugging at his adoptive mother's hand in an attempt to drag her with him. Calm down, Sun, Lusamine warned, but the three of them had set off. As they passed through Paradise Complex, Wick and Lusamine took it in turns to explain the different function and wings of Paradise to Sun. Sun lifted it carefully, then rushed off to interact with Pokemon under their watchful eyes. Wick hadn't spoken about Sun again, remembering the way he looked at her, while in the Ice-type wing, she voiced her concerns at last. Is he safe? Safe? I'll look after him, Wick. I will never hurt him. No, Wick said. Is he safe around others? He seems... She searched for the right word. Very, very agitated by the idea of you leaving him. Lusamine put a finger to her chin delicately, absently. I think he'll be okay once we've been together for a while. Once I really understand how he functions now. You're speaking like he's a toy, a machine. Wick's voice was disapproving yet again. Miss President, please bear in mind he is still a boy with emotions and feelings, even if they are twisted. Wick knew better than to cross Lusamine, especially now that she'd done this to Sun, but she had to voice her concerns. Of course I know that, was the response. But remember, he is mine. All mine. Wick didn't sigh, but she wanted to. The president had clearly lost her mind, and Wick's hands were tied. Her fear of Lusamine was only matched by her concern for Sun. Miss President, listen to yourself. If you're going to go through with this charade, I will absolutely not be a part of it unless he is treated well. Wick's indignation at Sun's situation was clear in her tone. She glanced at him. He was petting an anima, speaking to it soothingly. Wick, what makes you think I won't treat him well? Wick could have easily answered, but knew not to. It would only incur her anger. Instead, she sighed, folding her arms. I'll trust you. For now. Thank you. Oh, and if you would, order some of those emerald jars from Driftavale City. Lusamine tried to say it offhand, but slipped up in a little delivery. May I ask what you plan on doing with them? Wick said, already fulfilling the order. Sun was now trying to curl up next to an Alolan sand shrew, which was hiding in its igloo-like armor. Sun wants something like mine, Lusamine said, tapping her fingernails on the crystal she wore. Very expensive fashion, Wick murmured, a hint of disapproval Lusamine didn't pick up on. I can afford it, Lusamine replied, amused. I dare say you can, Wick replied. It's done. Thank you very much. Oh, greetings, you two, came a familiar voice. Lusamine turned left and Wick right to look behind them as Faba sauntered up to them. Where's the boy? Abandon him all. Faba saw Lusamine's expression change and stuffed the sentence. He's over there, Wick said and pointed. Faba didn't look. Yes, I see that, he waved irritably. Why are you here? Lusamine hissed. To see the result. Call him over. You don't order me about, Faba, Lusamine told him, every syllable spoken with scorn. So he doesn't work? Lusamine had to imagine throttling him to avoid performing the act. He works perfectly fine. He is not some machine. Lusamine avoided Wick's glance at her repeating words. He is my son. I didn't realize you intended to keep up the delusion, Faba taunted. Sun was now watching the sand shrew roll around, kicking up tufts of snow. How childish. When are you getting the other two back so we can dispose of him? We are not disposing of him. I am keeping him. Faba's words had reminded Lusamine of Guzma's phone call. She made a mental note to chase up with Guzma after she was done showing Sun around. The chill of the ice-type wing got them all simultaneously as a bitter breeze passed through the area. Wick was the only one watching Sun now and saw him shake. Sun, she called. Yes, Miss Wick. Are you warm enough? Sun thought. No. He headed back towards them, Lusamine nodding her appreciation towards Wick's concern. Faba, meanwhile, chortled at Sun's blunt response. Faba, go away, Lusamine demanded. No, I want to observe how he turned out. Lusamine grabbed Faba by the shoulder, digging her nails into him painfully. If you so much as hint at any idea he's not my son, I will personally throw you off the paradise with a weight around your ankles, wretch. Faba smirked. There should be no need. Good, Lusamine said, and released him as Sun appeared at her side. She took Sun's hand, making Faba pull a face. Who's that? Sun asked, pointing to Faba. I'm Faba, branch manager here on Ether Paradise, and head of our many varied and important projects to ensure Pokemon conservation as well as some other duties. He interrupted Lusamine's reply, unaware that the act of him doing so made Sun scowl at him and hold onto the president tighter. I'd prefer if you let my mother tell me, Sun said in the voice that told the listener there would be no negotiating, no bartering. Faba's mouth fell open in surprise. Sun's angry reaction less than he expected. Excuse me, but I am just as important to the running of the— You're not, Lusamine interrupted and set off, pulling Sun along with her. I don't like him, Sun said to Lusamine, but loudly enough for them all to hear. Lusamine's laughed. Faba's face twitched with displeasure, and Wick remained neutral. Faba, spurned by the two, sneaked away as they transitioned into the rock-type sanctuary, much to Sun and Lusamine's delight. Even Wick was happy with the scientist's departure. The rest of the tour passed without incident, and Sun was even able to build a little trust towards Wick despite his earlier reluctance. When the time came for Sun and Lusamine to retire back to the mansion, Sun waved goodbye to Wick with a far more genuine smile. Wick waved back, hoping he would at least be happy at the paradise. Good night, Sun, Lusamine whispered to him, switching off the light. Good night, Mother, Sun replied, rolling over to fall asleep. Will you be able to sleep by yourself tonight? Lusamine asked. She had rather bring Sun to her room with her than have Sun come down in the middle of the night. Yes, Mother. I'll see you tomorrow, Sun mumbled into his pillow. See you tomorrow, Sun. I love you. I love you too. Lusamine took the stairs back down to her bedroom and got changed to go to sleep. As she did so, she remembers Guzma's call. Too late now, she dismissed and lay down, thinking of Sun as she fell asleep. Sun, meanwhile, had no intentions of sleeping. He waited an hour, then two, then slowly, purposefully, got out of bed and looked at himself in the moonlit mirror. Not perfect, he whispered. He needed to be reminded of what perfection was. Slipping out of his room, he silently trod across the hall to the stairs, gliding across the mansion like a specter. He found himself at Lusamine's room again. This time, he wouldn't wake her, just admire her. Holding his breath, he placed his hand on the sheer black door handle and agonizingly, slowly, gradually pulled it down, opening the intricate white door. He took 2 minutes just to cross the room to get to her bed. She was fast asleep. Sun smiled and watched her sleep with a great pain in his heart. He wanted to be like her. Exceedingly gently, he sat down and prepared to wait until morning. So, not only is Lusamine batshit crazy, but Sun is becoming batshit crazy. That's great. That's totally great. I mean, what would you expect when somebody, like, for lack of a better word, mind fucks you? I really find it so funny that, I think it was like at the very beginning where Lusamine was like, oh, I'm going to regret, programming his dedication because it was too great. And I'm like, girl, you literally did this to yourself. What are you talking about? Also, I feel like there was probably some pronunciation mistakes in there. I am genuinely sorry. I tried to look up some, but I couldn't really find all of it, and I think it's because it's Pokemon names. That, and if, please, give me feedback on Wick's voice. I did get feedback on Guzma's, so I changed that one to just make him sound gruff, because, again, I can't do a southern accent for shit. But yeah, let me know what you think.